either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird MicroViews. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And continuing in the adult animation world, we do another Ralph Bakshi movie.
To round it all out.
We're doing Fire and Ice.
Which I feel should be renamed Ass Cheeks, the movie.
There is so much
bottom in this movie.
Male and women bottom.
Everybody's butt is hanging free in this movie.
Yeah. Which is kind of a weird thing to see, especially when they're, like, at the edge of a glacier.
Yeah, no, like, half of this movie takes place in a frozen tundra. But still, everybody's butt cheeks are just flapping in the wind.
Yeah. So, for those unfamiliar with Fire and Ice, it's a screenplay by Roy Thomas and Gary Conway. The character's created by Ralph Bakshi and Frank Frazetta.
Mm-hmm. And
it's directed by Bakshi, and it follows a caveman kind of dude finding a prince, or going to save a princess from a evil, not even ice wizard?
Yeah. Okay, so for those who didn't read the description on IMDb, which honestly really makes this a lot more clear, two warring kingdoms, the Fire Kingdom and the Ice Kingdom, are at war, and the Ice has the upper hand and is currently winning when we join the story. There's a beautiful woman who is the daughter of the Fire King, Lord, I don't know what you want to call him. And then there is this other dude who I honestly don't remember where he's from or what he do, but he's here.
Necron, or
yeah,
or is it the caveman dude?
Caveman dude. Together they save the Fire Kingdom along with Jaguar Man.
Larn is his name.
Sure.
And Jaguar Man is my favorite character in this movie. His name is Darkwolf. Thank you very much.
Yes. We should note that this is one of the Bakshi movies where we did film everything with real people and then draw over them on cell later, which means that the starring list is, for the most part, doubled up, with the exception of Darkwolf, who is only played by one man, both voiced and in the action sequences.
Yeah, that's the hard thing with this one, is the Bakshi did say in the commentary, because I did listen to the commentary this weekend, that he just put in people who he thought could do the best for whatever they needed at that time. So that, like, every one of these characters has, like, 3 people doing it. And actually, Frazetta almost played Darkwolf.
You know, I can see it because once you draw over these people, they don't look a whole lot like what you started with.
No.
And honestly, that's fine. This movie, if you can't tell by the movie poster somehow, is following the success of Beastmaster and Conan the Barbarian, and was really playing off of that whole fantasy, you know, almost, like, we hadn't quite reached the D&D level of fantasy, but we were getting close with the whole, like, rough tumble, man save woman, rah!
Yeah, well, and part of that is because Frazetta, and I kind of, part of me wishes we had saved this for a deep dive, but I know with him, there's a lot to him outside of film rather than actual film, so it's hard to do it.
He's a cool dude, though.
But he is the godfather of fantasy art. He influenced, like, even Star Wars and shit like that. And I haven't done a deep dive on him, so I don't know a whole lot about him other than I've seen some of his paintings.
I was going to say, he's one of those people who you might not know his name, but you have 100% seen his work.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not the only artist who you've definitely seen his work, even if you don't know his name. Some of the background cells for this were done by the absolute legend, Thomas Kincaid, which is a little mind-blowing to think about, because all I think about when I think of Thomas Kincaid is, like, paintings that go on your mom's wall, or, like, the calendar that goes in the kitchen. Master of light and shadow, master of the landscape of Americana, and also apparently a background artist for a Bakshi film.
There's a lot of famous artists, like, or famous future animators who worked on this production.
There's a ton of people.
Well, the way Bakshi worked, he would give someone a portion to draw, and they owned that portion. So it wasn't like people were doing in between frames. They were doing that entire scene. So there was a lot going on with that too. And also, one thing I think that's interesting about this movie is, one, it started off as a just Bakshi production concept of something he wanted to do because he loved fantasy.
He does.
But also he loved Frazetta.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to see what he could teach him about painting. So it's just like, I wanted to fuse two things I love together. And on top of that, he completely understood that you couldn't do a comic of Frazetta's work.
Yeah, no, you really can't.
Instead, he wanted to do something that was more technologically doable and also more like a Frazetta comic book rather than an actual movie with his artwork, even though he believes we could do a movie in his style today.
Oh, I can definitely see it today, but especially if you look back at like what animation looked like in 1990s or 1980s, because this is 1983, I can see why we chose to film and then animate over the trace object, the rotoscope technique, because this is all action almost all the time. And having those people move fluidly and to have those actions look realistic and grounded and heavy was really hard to get well done, and especially for a full-length movie.
Yes, and especially so with this one, because I did listen to the commentary, Bakshi did make some very good arguments in the fact that we bitch and complain about with Lord of the Rings that some of it is very rough and it's quote-unquote animation. And to an extent, I would say some of it's not particularly animated.
Yeah.
But with this one, he specifically said there's like this mistake of not accrediting rotoscoping for animation when it really is animation.
No, and I think this is the good example of rotoscoping, where unfortunately Lord of the Rings is the poorer example. And all of that comes down to the background, how detailed the characters are, and honestly how well we remember to erase the background that we were tracing.
Yeah. Because
this one looks so smooth, the animation style, despite having lots of different people working and putting their own touches on it, this movie looks seamless the whole way through. Everything, even though like you don't know what's going to happen next in this film. You have no idea what the next step any of these characters are going to take. And even when the craziest thing possible happens, dinosaurs, it feels correct and right just because everything moves so well together.
Well, and that's partially, I think, also not just due to the animation, but Bakshi pointed out that the way Frazetta designed his characters is he made them feel like they could actually wear their attire and whatnot. So they felt of their time and of their era. There's nothing too advanced. It feels very prehistoric fantasy.
Definitely, and I also think some of that was attributed to James Gunnery, who also worked on this film. He was mostly a background artist, but he did have some hand in a couple of character and background displays. And he's the artist for Dinotopia, a beloved, fantastic book and movie.
I have learned about this series, and there's a TV miniseries, I guess, that I have become aware of this show this year.
Yeah, the movie is something special. The book is fantastic. The book is beautifully illustrated. It's a really great story. And then there's the show.
I'm aware.
Yeah, but I can see how all of these big names with their own styles, bringing in, you know, the light work, the character designs, the just out of left, like everyone brought their own stuff to this table, and it all really cohesively worked because they were also given their own space to really develop the story a little bit. Whereas with Lord of the Rings, I think part of it was it was a little rushed. And also, like, they were sticking so hard to trying to be faithful, and there's just too much to, like, shove into that one movie.
Well, and on top of that, in his adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, at least the Fellowship of the Ring, because I know he didn't go on and do The Return of the King.
Different person.
But in this one, in that version, he basically went through a book and a half in, like, 2 hours. Which is
impressive, because that's a dense book.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this one doesn't suffer from any of that, in my opinion, because while some of the actions are a little stupid, I'm looking at them throwing the rocks from above.
The rock throwing's a little cheesy, but also when you see the acting, like the behind-the-scenes shots where they're throwing, like, the foam boulders, it makes a lot of sense why they look like they're heaving stuff the way they are. And, like, it does feel like acting.
Yeah.
Like, it still feels good. Now, we are singing this praise of this movie, and you would think that, wow, this movie was so well received and everybody loved it right out the gate, and that would be a lie.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody liked this film, critic-wise, when it came out.
Yeah.
Fans did like it. Let's be clear. Fans loved this movie, especially Bakshi fans loved this from the beginning. I have a few choice quotes from some critics. Love comics, but hate turning pages. Okay, love it.
That's technically a review, I guess.
This would be better if you were a sex-obsessed 12-year-old boy, but that's not as essential to watch. This movie is quote-unquote tiring and unintentionally funny.
I will agree with the unintentionally funny, and then it's interesting to a 12-year-old boy.
100%.
Tigra's ass is on this screen so fucking much.
Everybody's butt is on the screen.
Yeah, but for a 12-year-old boy.
For a 12-year-old boy, and I see why critics weren't a fan, because on a first pass watch, the story is a little all over the place.
Yeah.
It's high fantasy in, like, the most caveman sort of way. There's random war happening, there's wizards, there's dinosaurs, there is a lava-based castle that has a lava moat for no reason.
It's dope as shit, you kidding
really
me?
is dope as all hell. And despite all of this, like, crazy out of their sort of mindset, everyone is basically, like, spears and goblins level fighting. And yet, despite all of the things that I can understand why a critic would say this is a bad movie, I would argue that's why it's so good.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. When I was rewatching it, it's set during the last Great Ice Age.
Sure, why not?
All it really is just Ice Age Lord of the Rings without an actual ring. It's like the last great war between men and Sauron, but instead of Sauron being the dark evil one controlling technically he's controlling kind of hordes of orcs with Neanderthals in this movie.
Yes, I think they call them the lower beings.
The subhumans.
The subhumans, thank you.
Yes.
Because they're a little questionably drawn, but not too bad.
Yeah, there is a little bit where
we get a little toe in the line. Yeah,
Bakshi did say they are very similar to Frazetta's black people.
Yeah.
So it's like there are a couple, but at the same time, like the thing I like about the Neanderthal, the subhumans in this one, is that they have a level of intelligence.
Yes.
Like they're
not monkeys in people shape.
Yeah, no, they're not some dumb beast.
And they can talk and stuff in this movie too.
Yeah, they just have their own language that we don't understand because we're viewing it from the human side.
Exactly.
But,
no, I think that part works.
Yeah. But also the names of these places too I want to talk about.
Oh,
quick.
Yes, of course.
Ice Deep and Fire Keep.
Beautiful. The rhyme, not lost on me. I think it's fantastic.
Nope.
Every person's name in this is some bullshit fantasy name like Jarol, Princess Tigra, like Necron, Dark Wolf, and like I don't remember a single actual name. Like even though they are constantly saying them to each other, couldn't tell you who's who.
I only remember the main four because it doesn't matter because everyone else is on screen for like maybe 5 minutes.
Yes, and in reality, we're really only invested in one character if all of us are being really honest with ourselves here.
Tigra.
Yes.
And Dark Wolf.
Some Dark Wolf.
I am here for Dark Wolf. I want a whole series of this man.
Dark Wolf feels a lot like an old 80s like action cartoon character where they've drawn him a little bit overly superhero-esque to go to the rest of this world. Like he has too much Batman in him to fit in with the rest of this world. Yeah. And he's also dangerously close to like the Lone Ranger in certain aspects. Where he just, like, shows up out of nowhere riding a horse and is like, yeah! And then, like, disappears into the wind, essentially.
Yeah, I can see that a little bit. And, like, I appreciate that, though, because he does stand out the best. Like,
he sure does.
He's fantastic. But, like, at the same time, he is almost a nothing character. He's that kind of Deus Ex Machina.
You just assume he's super strong and powerful because he shows up wearing a panther hat.
Okay, yeah, because he's dark and mysterious. But, yeah, okay, here's the thing that I learned.
Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed in some of the editing of this movie.
Okay.
Because it was brought to my attention that Steve Sondor, the guy who played Dark Wolf, he had a piece of script that gave a big reveal that gave more depth to his character than just kind of showing up and saving the day.
He literally just shows up one scene and is just part of the movie now.
Yeah, and then comes and kills Necron. But
yeah,
the part that was cut out is, it turns out he is Necron's father.
Okay, that's so much cooler. Why did we cut that?
No, exactly. Like
we could have cut the scene where he stands on a rock in the background for 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's frustrating. Of like, he is such a cooler character. Of like, okay, his son's been turned evil by his one-time lover, and now it's by his hands that he kills or saves the world.
That's so much cooler because when we say that he just shows up and is now part of the movie, we are not exaggerating. You barely get told this man's name, let alone like why you should care about him.
Well, that's the other cool thing about this movie too, is there's a lot you can infer, especially with like, because there's a small bit where part of the reason he's wearing the mask he has is his character is supposed to be this type of almost deity, mythological, like legendary character for them. But also, there's other parts that I can totally see where Peter Jackson would have been inspired by some of this movie.
100%.
Because it also shows this ancient civilization that we can guess is maybe an ancient civilization. We don't know, there's just ruins. But it reminded me of the Númenórean ruins in Lord of the Rings that we see scattered throughout the world. Yeah,
definitely. Where there's hints of bigger lore and a greater world development that I don't want to say we don't have time to go into in this movie, because, like, there's a lot of nonsense that just really aren't plot related.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, it's kind of fun to not have everything explained.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's a lot with this movie, too, that I think that is very underlying, especially with, like, Necron.
Oh, and especially with how the war goes, because we show up almost at the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
We barely know what the rest of this battle has looked like.
We're there for the last push against Necron and Necron pushing back. We're at the battle that what's the name of the battle in Lord of the Rings? The last battle with Sauron.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Oh no, I completely agree. Like, there's a lot to infer, and also if you are a 12-year-old boy who wants to just look at butts, you can, and you won't really miss anything. You could watch this in both directions, I think. Yeah,
and to be fair, at least with Tigra, she lives in the side of a volcano. Of course, she's not going to wear heavy clothing. Exactly. Like, you look at that entire tribe of people, they're wearing not much.
Yeah, almost exclusively wearing, like, lingerie.
The one that doesn't make sense is the northern tribe, where maybe we're in their summer, but they're having to fight iceberg or glaciers.
I will say that the northern people are mostly the quote-unquote subhumans. So we could argue that maybe, like, they're just warmer than the...
Oh, I was talking about the people, not the subhumans.
In their defense, the queen is wearing the most clothes out of any woman in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then her son does have a cape.
True.
So he is a little toasty warm, and he is an ice wizard. So, like, I assume he isn't cold often.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean... Yeah, that's the other... Yeah.
And then pretty much everyone else in their ice keep is dead. So...
Fair.
Not cold.
Yeah, a battle of life versus death, basically.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing, too, is we talk about Tigra being a little bit... She's very sexualized.
She is 100% sexualized. But she also uses that as, like, a weapon in the movie. And granted, nowadays, would that be a trope? Probably not. But this is riding off the back of Beastmaster, which heavily relied on that as its, like, main promotional material. Yeah. And then also, like, Conan the Barbarian, like, this is meant to be a barbarian movie.
Well, same with the men as well. The men
yeah, no. The amount of men abs that you get to Google and the amount of men butts just hanging out there is tremendous.
Yeah, but also there's a little bit with Necron with a little eroticism between him and the men where when Tigra is captured and brought to him, he's like, I have no need for your wench's mother. I only need fighting. And he's kind of...
He's a little flamboyant. And in an 80s hinting sort of way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Like, there's a line where his mom's like, no, you need heirs. And he's like, I have no need for heirs, mother.
Yes, exactly. But also in the way he fights, too, I think he's interesting because...
He never leaves his throne room to fight.
No, but...
And yet he's the biggest force on the battlefield.
And on top of that, well, he does leave it towards the end to fight.
Well, yeah, because he's being pursued by apparently now his father.
Yeah, but when he is fighting Larn...
Yeah. Oh, Larn.
There's that bit where Larn is winning, and it shows that he's just a spoiled child, and this war just feels like a big temper tantrum, because he resorts to magic the moment he starts losing.
It's so quick that he starts resorting to magic, too.
Yeah, he sees the people as playthings and not necessarily They're just the same as the subhumans he controls.
Exactly. He's not ruling a nation.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing about this movie is, on the surface, it is cavemen fighting a glacier wizard.
Yes, and honestly, not mad at that, but...
No, but that's the thing is, like, the more you go through it, the more interesting it is. Because on top of that, like, while the humans are trying to fight, the humans are really, for me, the most boring outside of Darkwolf. Because even then, Necron is the child of his mother's ambitions, very much, or maybe even a little revenge, because we never really get her backstory.
True.
But it makes me think of a little less dynamic and interesting Lady Snowblood.
Oh, I can see it. Yeah, she definitely feels like she's hoping to pull strings, but she is dealing with an absolute rotten adult child.
Yeah.
Who's, like, refusing to do as she needs him to.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, once we know more about Darkwolf, even if you don't know the whole story with Darkwolf or the background, Lauren and Tigra honestly become, like, it's this weird twist where they start off as, like, the hero-heroine type, and then the
spotlight is totally stolen by Darkwolf.
Yeah, and it fits so much, and it does piss me off about that editing of it.
It 100% does, because it feels so out of left field. Because at the end, we're really ramping up to have this big moment where, you feel like, oh, Darkwolf will, like, let him get through at the last minute, and our hero will win the day. No, our hero just kind of dicks around, and he's there, but Darkwolf is really the one we're supposed to be rooting for this whole time. You just didn't know it.
Yeah, no, it is a mess of a movie plot-wise.
Yeah, but I can also see where everything comes from. I can see why... And also, this movie's pretty short. It's a fantasy movie crammed into, like, 80-ish minutes. Maybe not even, like, a full 85, I think. So, like, this is pretty short for a full fantasy movie to try and cram a whole war and all of these characters we're trying to get through and all of the fight scenes. Because that was a big part of the movie that they really wanted to focus on. They wanted this to be an action-packed movie. And action doesn't progress stories. It looks cool. It's fun. But it doesn't add to plot.
Depends on the plot you're thinking of.
I suppose, but, I mean, for a barbarian film, you need to have action. Yeah. And I agree, like, the action in this looks great. I'm very impressed with the amount that they managed to cram in. But, yeah, I mean, just people fighting. I mean, it's a war, but that doesn't move plot along.
No. And a lot of it feels like very reactionary. It's just like this person does this thing, so this person does this thing.
There's a lot of running away.
And then, oh, well, we have our last pterodactyl fighters. Let's use those.
The pterodactyl fighters came out of nowhere, and I did giggle.
I wonder how much of this was inspired from Lord of the Rings, because that's the thing. Bakshi said he didn't do much. There was not a whole lot of him in the writing room. It was just more so him directing and producing, so... Like,
I mean, maybe.
The pterodactyls feel like the eagles from Lord of the Rings, so I feel there's a lot of back and forth between, like, this being somewhat influenced by Lord of the Rings, / this somewhat influencing Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and little tidbits here and there.
I can definitely agree. I know that at least one of the writers, and I think both, did work quite a bit on the Conan Marvel comic series, which does explain the butt cheeks.
Yeah.
And also, like, just the general Conan vibe. But... I also see, especially the way the war is portrayed, where instead of having this big overview of the war, kind of the way that, like, the more, like, new shows have been doing, this feels like how Lord of the Rings handled war, where it's very one personal, like, you get told about war is happening, you see, like, a glimpse of it, but we're really focused on this one person who's not even on the front lines. They're over here dicking around, doing their own thing.
Yeah.
While war is happening.
That's like that's all the Hobbits are.
I do think it fits well into a story like this, because I think a lot of the other, like, more epic war movies where we're looking at generals, we're looking at kings and following their story specifically and seeing this war as like a chessboard, is cool, but it doesn't fit with the barbarian action movie that they were wanting to make.
Well, and I think part of that is, and why Lord of the Rings is so compelling in that style, and how this one has its, like, little bits of compellingness, is that it's told more from the standpoint of the common folk, us, instead of the kings and queens conniving together or making it an Arthurian tale.
Yeah, because the only thing the Fire King ever really does is he's like, if they get too close to the river, I'm letting the lava go.
Yeah.
And he literally doesn't do anything. He's just like, pull the lever, Kronk, and lava runs out. And the lava doesn't even seem to do anything.
Yeah, and sending the pterodactyl fighters.
Which isn't even, he's not even on one. He's just like, go, my minions, fly, my pretties, fly!
Yeah. Fun little bit about the pterodactyl.
Yeah, I love pterodactyls.
Those were specifically given to Peter Chung, who would later go on to do Aeon Flux.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big people involved in this, like doing all the the little side bits, which I think is just so cool. And kind of why I wish we had done like a little bit more of a deep dive, but
sure, but at the same time, this movie is very much, despite having all these big people work on it, and like it is a fun and cool movie, and honestly, for a Bakshi film, this has like a lot of background stuff available, unlike some of his other works, where we had to wait for interviews to come out later about it.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, like, a lot of those are him retrospectively, like, thinking about a project, which we've talked about our feelings on those.
Yeah, well, the thing I like about it is he's very open about whether he knows it or not.
Yeah.
His commentary is so on point with, like, where he's at that time.
Definitely.
Because he even brings up, like, I haven't seen this movie since it first came out, so I might not remember everything. And then, like, the guy who's interviewing him was, like, bring up like little detailed plots. It's like, I don't know. That was 30 years ago. You expect me to remember this? It's like,
I do appreciate his honesty in his interviews.
Yeah, and there's like there's bits where it goes silent and he's like, well, don't you have another question? He's like, I kind of wrote it into segments, so I thought you'd talk a little bit more here. He's like, here, give it to me. Let me see if I do it again. Let me see if I can find something I can piggyback off of. It's just like he is one of the best commentaries I've heard because he is a no nonsense, don't give a shit guy.
100% he is. However, I can see where, especially if you're an animation nerd like I am, he's a little frustrating because he really sees himself as a director more than an animation legend that he is. And so, like, when you're trying to get an interview out of him or behind the scenes on how stuff was done, he's just like, I don't know, man, my animation team really killed it here.
But
and you're like, man, come on.
Well, that's the other thing, too, is because he is so knowledgeable with everything he's done, because he even brings that up is, like, we had to do it this way because you can't, the way you have to do it, you watch someone and you do additional work to make it look better, and you have to, like, actually animate it. And that's because he's like, the way you get it to work is you have to know animation to do it. And that's how he started. If you go back and listen to our last episode, that's where he started. He started doing filler in between stuff. So he was on the grounds doing the animation before he moved into a directorial position.
And that's where he's frustrating, because he knows all this stuff, and once he gets pressed for it, like, you can get information out of him. But if you want to know about him and his style, you have to dig through interviews for almost all his movies to really piece together his whole work, unlike other directors or writers or animators who will sit down almost every big movie that they have, if they've gotten big enough, and, like, kind of reiterate the process, which I'm sure for them is boring, but for, like, nerds like me who would like it all kind of condensed into one spot, like, it is nice when it's all condensed. Thank you, Peter Jackson.
Well, that's why it's called research, and these are produced by smaller studios than what Peter Jackson could do.
That's true, but he is knowledgeable and he is willing to talk, which is great, because we've definitely talked about some directors and animators who just are not interested in, like, the public side. Well, but he's that middle ground where he knows a lot, he has good talking abilities. He's not, like, a silent or, like, just rambling about what his, like, friend who happens to be on screen at any one point. Like, he's not a rambler. But he's also not an in-depth research guy like some other people. He's that weird middle ground for an interview.
Well, and that part of with that, too, is he does bring it up a little bit, is that his era of people, they didn't keep secrets. That's the thing, is, like, they're
That's
very
why there's so many photos, the background of this.
Mm-hmm.
The background of the, like, live-action tracing would not have come out if this was today's work.
Yeah, it's not like some of these high-end directors who are like, oh, I don't have any inspiration. I just pull this from the ether of my mental magic state.
And it's not like other studios where, oh, well, we traced over that scene so many times for all these other movies because we couldn't be bothered to refilm it. Looking directly at you, Disney. No, he's very open. There's tons of photos about, like, of the action of this, which is really great and fascinating. There's lots of background and, like, behind the scenes. Everybody who's ever worked with him has at some point talked about their experience. fantastic, and I love it. And I think that's what makes his fans, like, so interested in his works, is it's not just good, it's not just adult animation that is a particular style, like, it's got that 80s vibe, kind of no matter what you look at, but there is a real passion behind everything that, like, can drive a fan base really well.
Yeah, well, and it's also partially, I think, because it is considered underground still. It's an offshoot of what we traditionally think of animation and cartooning.
With that said, this one particularly, while not maybe his most well-known work, it's still a very popular one.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not like the first thing that people think of when they hear his name. However, this one is like having some tricklings of some like revitalization.
Yeah, I mean, I have a special edition Blu-ray of this now that has all these cool features and commentary.
It's very cool. 2010, they were talking about doing a live-action remake.
Oh yeah, I am so pissed off that this fell through because Robert fucking Rodriguez
was given permission to do it. Granted, permission was given kind of lightly. I guess Bakshi wasn't super excited about the idea, but he did say, "Go ahead, you can have the rights for it." But 2014, Sony bought the rights to make the live action, so not dead. Sony's been known to sit on shit.
But there was the leak, and they canceled a shit ton of projects.
And so there's a good chance that the live action, we will have to wait for Sony to give up the rights and someone else take them. However, one of the critics back in the 80s said, "Boy, if you like comics but hate turning pages, this is for you." This got turned into a comic.
Yeah.
Recently, 2022, Dynamite Entertainment purchased and announced that they would be doing a prequel comic, and that got published in 2023. So, like, maybe more Fire and Ice bullshit.
I'm down for it. Honestly, of the movies I've seen,
this one is one of my favorites of his, partially because it is less of a commentary, and I love his, like, fantasy art style. I love the other people who work in this. I love their work in their different components, and I think you can see their influence. So for me, this is, like, the golden grail of Bakshi.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly where I was going with that, is I completely enjoy this movie to the point where, like, I get the commentary and a lot of the other stuff he does.
Yeah.
But the beauty of this one is because it is so simple, and the purity of the style of animation just work so well together, because it does combine the rotoscoping. The way he uses rotoscoping in this is just a reference to get the movement.
And it looks so clean.
And then on top of that, they do the fantasy animation that they use, like, rigs and some very basic stuff to, like, kind of get the idea together. Like her swimming through the water.
Yes.
They're like, did you just find, like, some animation or some reference for this? And he's like, no, I gotta think of how we did that. Oh yeah, we had this rig where we just strapped her
up in the air.
Yeah, exactly. And then just kind of, it did, but that's the cool thing. And it works,
though. It looks good.
It reminds me so much of that one YouTube guy. I can't remember his name, but Adventure Awaits. Huzzah!
Yeah, bless him and his beautiful works.
Yeah, no, exactly, because we still see that style of animation have its little resurgences here and there. Granted, it's not... Well, and actually, in a way, this is kind of in a way, you can see this as like a precursor to the suitmation or the motion capture.
Oh, 100%, I can see it.
Yeah, where instead of drawing over the motion capture, or the motion capture generating the model and movement for you, this is the purest form of that. Actually, look at Monster House, where they specifically use their motions to make the characters move. Yeah,
no, and I think it looks great, and also the style of this is the most condensed, pure 80s fantasy that you can get without true wizards, right? Like, this would be painted on the side of somebody's van who has a shag carpet on the inside and a mini bar in the back. And sometimes that's the vibe I want to watch, and this is the peak of that to me.
No, exactly, because, like, I don't get me wrong, I like Bakshi's movie Wizards as well.
Oh, I do too, but it's a totally different vibe.
Yeah, it's a very heavily commentary film compared to this one.
And it's so much more snarky. This one really did think it was being serious, and the humor is there because you don't know what's happening next.
Oh yeah, my favorite part, and I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about at this point?
Yeah.
Is the end of the movie where they killed Necron, and they're like, now we must choose peace. It's like, the fuck are you guys talking about? You
What are
just
you-
waged this war to kill this guy.
Why are we choosing peace now? No,
Yeah.
my favorite part, hands down, is when the king of the Fire Nation goes, "You, my son, must go get peace," and his son's like, "You're sending me to die," and he's like,
Yeah.
"No, this is your job as my son." Later in the movie, "Where is my son? He's dead, my lord." Ah, damn it.
Or when Larn is attacked by those 3 wolves and just his yell at the spirit, just like, ah! It is so cheesy but great, and that's
fantastic.
I think that's the essence of Fire and Ice. It is that pure, simple fantasy that if you want to look deeper into the themes, there are parts that you can pull out.
Oh, sure.
But they're not. You have to look and think for them. Like there's little influences in the background where the commentator, I can't remember his name, who was with Bakshi, pointed out in the scene where like Tigra is washing.
Mm-hmm.
Behind the subhumans, there's mushrooms.
Yes.
So there's a
lot of hints to what it could be.
Or there's those adult vibes of like you're not, unless you're looking for it, you're not gonna find it.
And don't get me wrong, I enjoy an adult like themed animation just as much as the next person. I don't think that just because it's toned down in any way makes it better. I like that this one toes that line so well where like technically no nipples are shown. Technically there's no like full nudity. It's just butt cheeks and some butt crack.
Yeah.
Not nude, just butt cheeks.
Yeah.
Technically no one drinks anything, or like the murder is really light, the gore is very light.
There's none of that. There's no blood or like
like they throw a man on the spikes and he just goes ah and
Yeah.
dies. And honestly, I kind of feel like it adds to the fantasy. Like this feels like the like epic fantasy that doesn't need to be taken seriously unless you really wanted it to.
Well, and one thing fascinating, because it goes back to there's a scene with a lot of butt in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's when Tigra's captured.
There's so much butt.
And they do slow motion. That's the thing, though, is that's one of the impressive things of this movie is they animate slow motion. And they're like, so what? They have to do double the drawings, and Bakshi's like, no, about 10 times like what you would usually
so many.
do. It's just like you kind of take that for granted with traditional film and
being able to like manipulate the either physical film or the digital film.
Mm-hmm.
And with this style, you have to hand draw everything.
Yeah, exactly. But Chris, rent, buy, streamer, decline that we ever watched Fire and Ice despite having an audio recording of us watching it.
This is one of the Bakshi films that for me is a buy. I think this movie's great. I love it. I love the fantasy. I love the like Conan the Barbarian vibes. I am a huge fan of Beastmaster, as we well know, because I accidentally watched that earlier. Yeah. So for me, this ticks all of my boxes of big fantasy, big action, really great animation, along with a lot of people who I've always looked up to and really enjoyed their either art with Frank or their paintings with Thomas Kincaid or Bakshi and his very good commentary and art style.
Yeah, I'm glad that you keep bringing up Beastmaster, because that was like season 2 or season 3 of the podcast.
Yes, and I stand by that movie. It's garbage. This one is fun. I am sure my mother would call this movie garbage. I have no doubt in my mind. However, I would say the average movie person will have a great time watching this.
Yeah, I'm going to say buy it as well. It honestly, of the Bakshi I've watched, it is probably leaning on being my favorite. As much as I like Fritz the Cat and Coonskin,
same.
This one is just so
much fun.
Yeah, this one's so good. So
totally agree.
And even though this is the end of our little dive into Bakshi, we do have one more adult animation movie that's a little bit more of an exploration that scans a bit more darkly and is highbrow side of the industry. And
yeah, a little less in the gutter than we've been.
Depends on the era and
true
the original source material. So
very true.
Yeah, but anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird MicroViews.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the Good, the Bad, and the Weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.